And welcome back to the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. We're here for another week, bringing you another amazing guest. You've already seen, it's kind of spoiler alert. You've already read the title of today's podcast. I'm doing double trouble here. I'm kind of seeing two. I got double vision. Help me welcome head coach of the University of Pittsburgh, Coach Alonzo Webb, and his assistant coach and son, Coach Alonzo Webb, the third, right? So we got two Alonzo Webbs. I love it. So for you guys and gals out there that might know these two or don't know these two, here's how we're going to refer to everybody, just so we can kind of help keep this as straight as possible. So head coach Alonzo Webb, who I've so graciously known for many, many years. I have done battle with a couple of my teams against his teams. I did not fare so well. You see who's still coaching and who got out of coaching. I'm going to blame him. That's the reason why I got out of coaching. We're going to call head coach Coach Webb. And we're going to call assistant coach, Coach Zoe, because that's how they're known in the coaching world. So Coach Webb and Coach Zoe, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate you guys' time.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. This is exciting, right? Because, every coach's journey is unique and important, and we love sharing and telling and exploring those stories. Today's journey, we're going to have two amazing coaches in your journeys, but also how those journeys intersect together as father and son as well. So Coach Webb, we're going to give you the honor since you're the residential old guy here. We're going to start with you. Why don't you talk, let's go back in our way back machine. Help us understand, where did track and coaching start for you? Kind of, where did you grow up? How was track in your life? And we'll kind of move on from there.
Yeah, I grew up in Pittsburgh, on the north side of Pittsburgh, and I was always into track. Like to run, and a lot of it was distance running. I just ran, just loved to run. And then so my coaching journey started when I was probably 17 years old. In 1972, got my first job. It was a City of Pittsburgh Parks and Recreation's track and field for the Jesse Owens program. I competed in that program when I was 15 years old. We had the opportunity to meet Jesse Owens. He gave me a trophy I finished, I think, second or third in high jump in the Jesse Owens games in Pittsburgh, the Arco Jesse Owens games. And that was held in the old Pitt Stadium that was on campus. So it was a dirt track at the time, of course. And I got a chance to meet him. He handed me my trophy when I was 15 years old.
Wow.
2 years later, I got an opportunity to coach in the program that I had just been competing in 2 years prior for the City of Pittsburgh Parks and Recreation. So that's when I started my coaching journey. And go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's pretty young. Were you coaching others of equal age, like, maybe a year or two younger, or were you coaching younger kids?
Yeah, I was coaching kids that were in that program, and it was from 9 years old up to 15. That was the age group in that Jesse Owens program. So I coached from 9 years old to up to 15 years old when I first started.
And what led you into that? What was your interest in almost kind of giving, you're 17, 18 years old. I mean, most 17, 18-year-old kids are, opposite sex and money. That's what we're thinking about at 17, 18 years old. You were, actively starting to work on, and did you even think of it as a career, the start of a career at that point, or was it just a summer job or whatnot?
It was a summer job, but it was something that I really enjoyed, coaching and everything. So I just fell into it, and I fell in love with it right away. I just wanted to be around track and field as much as possible. So my first summer job was coaching track, and then I got into coaching. Also got into coaching a club team. I was an assistant coach with called New Image Track Club. It was run by Albert Kennedy. That was the team that had Roger Kingdom on it, and Clinton Davis, Candy Young. There were a lot of the top athletes at the time that were on that track team. So I started my coaching career there as well.
Yeah, that's not a bad place to start, Roger Kingdom.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost downhill from there, to be real frank.
Yeah.
So
don't get me wrong. I didn't coach him.
Yeah.
Albert Kennedy coached him. I coached some of the younger kids.
Yeah.
So.
But to be around that's, honestly, and to have such, people like Jesse Owens, for crying out loud, just to be even in your life in that sense, that's the, kind of guy that I read about, not meet. So to have that experience and that love of track and field, it kind of embolden that love.
Yeah, it was kind of unique because, like I said, I did meet him in, I believe it was 1968, actually, when I met Jesse Owens, 68, when he gave me my trophy. And then 2 years later, when I started working with the Jesse Owens track program, he came back to town. There was 12 cities around the country where he had the Arco Jesse Owens Championship. So he would travel around and hand trophies out at those 12 cities. And when he came in town, when I started working with the program, he invited all the coaches from the city of Pittsburgh track and field program up to his hotel room. So I got a chance to actually hang out with him. And the place is still there. It was on Fifth Avenue. It's right on Pitt's campus. It was called the Webster Hotel at the time. It's called Webster Hall now, and they turned them into condominiums, but it was a hotel at the time. But I got a chance to hang out with him for a few hours after the meet was over.
So that's super unique now. Okay, it's one thing to meet him and him give you a medal and a trophy. So what was he like? I mean, we hear these legendary stories that he was the humanitarian of humanitarian. I mean, he was the bring everybody together and let the best man win in regards to athleticism. What was it like hanging out with him? Was he everything that we read about and hear about?
Yeah, he was. And actually, I was in awe of him, of course, because that was my hero.
Sure.
Growing up, I used to read about him all the time. I wanted to be just like him. So have an opportunity to meet him. And most people, like you said, they don't get an opportunity to meet their heroes in person. Somebody would meet like Kobe Bryant or LeBron James or somebody like that. That's their heroes, or they love those guys, but they never have an opportunity to meet them. And I was fortunate to be able to do that.
Wow. Yeah, exactly right. We meet a LeBron James and get an autograph, but you get to hang out with Jesse, even for a 2-hour period. That's a big deal. I mean, you're in a very small club there, by the way, that have actually, had conversation with him. So where did you go from that club? What was the kind of the next step in your coaching career? And was it a career at this point? Meaning you thought, oh, this is my path forward as a career?
No, not at all. I wanted to be a school teacher. I wanted to actually be an art teacher. That's what I wanted to do in my life. I wanted to teach art. I loved art. That's my background. I call myself an artist, and a photographer. So I have that background. But that's what I wanted to do in life, was to just be a teacher, an art teacher. One of the things I wanted to mention too, and this might find this interesting, but when I was at Jesse Owens, in the Jesse Owens program, he gave me an autographed photo of him, which I still have. And it's probably 60 years old, maybe, or 50 something years old. I still have that autographed photo that he gave me.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me more about this artistry. This is, I love areas that I had no clue were going to come up. So tell me, you say you call yourself an artist, and you mentioned photography specifically. So is that kind of your mainstay? Are you into, sculpture or painting, or?
I was into a variety of the mediums, but most of it was just pencil sketch drawings. I was pretty good at drawing portraits. That was my favorite.
Really?
But I did get into some clay modeling and painting and things like that. A lot of graphic art, all those kinds of things. And then later in my art career, I did get into photography, and I really love photography, express myself through that.
I'm in awe of portrait drawers. I'll see, like, on social media, someone will post, like, they'll draw the same person, like, let's say Jesse Owens, they'll draw Jesse Owens as a 15-year-old, as them being 15 years old. And then they'll do it again as a 16-year-old. And you see their progression of how much better, as you practice your skill. And when they get good, I mean, a good portrait artist is kind of scary, actually. I mean, they really capture it's as if it was a photo. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you carry that through your coaching career? Like, was that, as you're coaching, we're going to learn some of the different stops. And of course, now at Pittsburgh, did you continue? Like, were you always, like, when you come home from a track meet, are you going to maybe a home studio or something and practicing, or what?
No, not anymore. Early in my career, I did, because I always loved to. So I would sit down on the weekends and I would draw or sketch or whatever. But as I got into my career, I stopped, and I haven't done it in a long time. Really? Coach Zoe was telling me, hey, you should start doing that again. He's kind of egging me on. Maybe when I retire,
I'm a best.
do that.
Smart kid right there. Yes, absolutely. For many reasons, right? Not just, the passion and the skill set that you have, but as coaches, and Coach Zoe and I were talking about this before we hit record. We're in it 24/7. I mean, we're recruiting 24/7. We're coaching 24/7. You're scoring out your conference meet 24. I mean, I know, what we're doing here.
Right.
And to have something that is equally passionate for you and that you spend time with, and some of it needs to be and has to be family and friends, but to also have another outlet is tremendously important. And I think, I think it's important for longevity in your career, whether it's coaching track, selling track equipment, et cetera. And while you may not do it now, I think that's what has maybe helped you continue to coach all throughout all these years, is to have that other passion to participate in. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm still working on my stick figure, so that's also why I think it's extremely impressive. I draw a stick figure and people are still like, "What is that?" And I'm like, "Man, it's a guy. Come on, you can't tell." Very embarrassing. So you wanted to be a teacher. I love that, and you are a teacher as
Right.
as a coach. So how did that go as you're pursuing teaching and art? How did this track coaching thing end up becoming the main way of living?
Well, yeah. When I graduated, well, along the way, the short version is I started coaching with New Image Track Club, and I started that. I coached with them for about 20 years as an assistant coach, and then they disbanded the club. Albert Kennedy didn't want it. He was more working with elite athletes like Roger Kingdom and those guys. He was going over Europe a lot with them, so he didn't have time for the kids anymore. For the age groupers. So we had a club that went from 9 years old up to 18 years old through high school. So he didn't want to do that anymore because he had too much on his hands with the post collegiate athletes and these really talented athletes he's going over Europe with. And so he disbanded the club. So I sort of felt a void. So I started my own club. And that was River City Elite Track Club in Pittsburgh. And so I started that, I believe, in 1993. And then I went through that until I carried that club on until 99. That's when I first started at Kent State as an assistant coach at Kent State.
So as you're running this club, are you also teaching, or was this the full-time?
No, I was doing a variety of things along the way. I was coaching. I had my club coaching, but I also had to pay bills. So
exactly.
Right. So it's actually, and I'm not sure that all the times and dates and everything, but I know I started out as a working in sales at Olin Mills photography studio, selling photographs and things like that. There's a corporation also I worked for. It was called PCA, Photo Corporation of America, out of close to Youngstown, Ohio. It was called Poland, Ohio. I went to the office up there on Mondays, got the photographs. And if you ever saw you go to a department store or whatever, and you see people in there setting up a booth and they're showing these families their photographs, and you sell them photographs or whatever of their families and children. They would come in a week prior, get their photographs taken, and I wouldn't take the photographs. Of course, the photographer would go into a store, take photographs of the family, and then a week later, they process those photographs, send them back to the office. I would go up to Youngstown, Ohio, get those photographs, take them back to the place where they had them photographed, and then sell them to the people who had their families taken pictures of. So that's basically what it was.
I mean, did you just hear the process to get a photo, boys and girls?
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. Now it's click, here it is.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable. It really is amazing. The transformation of what photographs have come from to where they are today. As a guy who loves photography and art, I'm going to call it old school. Do you like the old school way of, picture and developing, or do you like the new medium of, I can take 1,000 pictures and, card out the 100 that I like or whatnot?
Yeah, I think there's some there's some value in the old school way, because I like that. Watching you take some pictures and you go into the dark room and you sort of develop those pictures. It's really great to see that. You get a lot of fun out of that, and it's relaxing. But again, there's something too, also the new school way. You take these cameras and they have the fast shutter speed. You can take 100 pictures in a second, and you just sort of sort through the ones you like. I think there's some value in that as well. So, it's both ways for me. I don't prefer one over the other.
I took a black and white photo class in college down at Troy University, and we developed them as well ourselves, get in the dark room and everything. Yeah. And, even back then when, we didn't have digital pictures, it still was like this, like dark art. Like no one knew until you took the class, how do you actually develop a picture? Maybe see a TV show, where they hang it up on the line and all that stuff, but to actually do it in the different chemicals and see the photo, appear, and you had no real idea what that photo was until it did appear. I mean, you took it, but you don't know, did they blink and their eyes are closed? You had no idea until you actually developed. And now with the positive of the digital side is I can take 100, like I don't have to worry about wasting money. Like I can take 100 and pick out the 10% that are good or whatnot. Although I think we lose I love the art of not knowing. We know immediately what's in that picture and what happened, where in the developed world, you sent it away to get developed and you'd get your pictures. And I remember going to Walgreens and picking up my 32 pack or whatever and looking through, and 6 of them were awesome. The other ones, I'm like, who took that picture? I have no idea. So that's really cool. That's cool. So I love uniqueness and differences, right? And that's one of the reasons why we started the podcast, because each coach's journey is unique and different. If you know anything about Coach Webb, he dresses to the nines, right? I mean, there's no way of getting around this. You don't dress like a stereotypical track coach. And I don't mean that in any negative way. In fact, I mean it in all positive ways. It would not be a good podcast if I didn't approach the subject. When did this start? And I'm just trying to get a time frame. Like, we know you, I know you now as a college coach. I did not know you as a club coach. Were you, so if you don't know Coach Webb is always suit and tie, bow tie, great shoes. I mean, you look awesome, my friend.
Thank you.
You also look like you should pass out from a heat stroke, because it's not just the indoor meets he's doing this at, folks. I mean, it's at Texas Relays. It is at Nationals. He's there. When did that start, and why? There has to be an importance for you on this.
Yeah, there's an importance to me. And I'm not exactly sure when I started this. It's been a while now. But I remember when I was a kid and I would go to the library on weekends and in the summer and sit there and read all the books on the Olympic Games and Jesse Owens and all those kinds of things. And one thing that stood out to me when I was looking at those pictures and everything was I always noticed coaches at the finish line with the stopwatch in hand, and there's that string across, where you break it's actually an actual string and you break the tape there. I would always see the coaches with a suit and tie on, or shirt and tie. So one day I just said, I'm going to bring that look back, of coaches, the old school coaches, and honor that. And also I think, with our sport, we don't get, I think most people would agree, we don't get the kind of respect as a lot of other sports do for what we do. And I think if people don't understand what we go through and what we endure as a coach, as a track coach.
Yes.
So I wanted to respect the sport, and I wanted to respect my job and my university that I work for. And that's why I started doing it. And I felt a little bit weird at first, because it was way different than anybody has ever seen. And I felt, when I first started doing it, and I put a suit and tie on, and I walked out, and I was like, man, people are going to be looking at me. And I got the looks, and people were, I could see them staring, I could see them whispering, and it looks like they were snickering. I don't know if they were or not. Like, look at this guy. Look at this idiot. What's he doing? This is a track meet, man. So I understood that. And I'm sure that's what it was. A lot of people were doing that. But, and I felt a little bit uncomfortable. But I said, what the heck, man? This is what I want to do. And I want to respect our sport just like anybody else does. So I want to pay respect to it. So that's why I started doing it. And that's the reason why, was because I saw the old school coaches, with the suit and tie on and a fedora sometimes and whatever. So that's what I started doing.
I love that. I was honestly expecting a little bit more of it was almost like a Superman suit for you. Like, hey, when I put this on, I go to track and I coach, my kids. But instead of it being internalized as your main motivation, it's more of like, I want to respect our sports. And I love that. We are professionals as track and field coaches. You are a professional, and there is standards that you should be held to in relationship to how you interact with kids and how you interact with your program and things like that. So I love that. We just had a conversation with Cameron Babb from Washburn University out in Kansas, and we talked about when he was building their facility there, he kept raising the bar on what that facility could and should be. It started out as a football facility with 2 lanes, and then it became 4 lanes, and then it became a 300-meter track like at Kent, and then it ended up being this bank track with a football practice to the side, kind of like the Texas Tech. I don't know if you've been down there for that one, but I love that he did it in a right and professional way, but he continued to fight for his program and for his sport. instead of, you know, a lot of the attitudes, I shouldn't say a lot, some of the attitudes we see within track coaches, and maybe you've seen this, is we're just happy to be here. We're just happy the AD allows us to buy a set of uniforms once every 5 years. We're happy that they give us $1,000 to buy pole vault, whatever. Like, never like, hey, you know what, you actually, you know, to run your program safely and competitively, you need to upgrade this, or you need to have this facility or whatnot. So I love that your attitude is, hey, this is a professional sport. Whether I'm coaching basketball, football, or track, that doesn't, it's the sport is a sport. I'm a professional, so I'm gonna do what your consideration is to dress the part.
Right, absolutely. And then one of the other things too, and Coach Zoe will tell you this, when we go to the meets, indoor, outdoor, whatever, I want to let our athletes know that we're on a business trip. You know, this is not a vacation or anything like that. So when they see me at a track meet and they notice me, and they look at me with my suit and tie on, they know we're here for business. You know, this is not playtime. So that's one of the things too. And I think first impressions are important, you know, and I pass that along to my staff and everything. So when we go, Coach Zoe does a great job. He's responsible for what our staff wears as a, you know, at track meets. You know, everybody dresses the same, you know, with the same polo and whatever on. So we look like a team. And that's one of the big things for me. You know, it looks impressive and it looks intimidating when you come out there and you look the same. And when your staff looks the same, we're here for business, you know. And that's one of the things. And Coach Zoe does a great job of telling them, hey, on Friday, this is what we're wearing. On Saturday, this is what we're wearing, you know. And then, you know, so we go over and above, I think, where a lot of places do, to make sure that we're giving a professional image.
I love that. I was going to say, I whether you would maybe admit it or not, but I was going to say, I think you've had influence, because I've seen staffs like Pittsburgh and other schools where, hey, on a 2-day meet on Friday, we're wearing these sweater vests, you know, this color, et cetera. And on this day, we're going to wear our polos or whatnot. And it's going to be this color, this style polo, not just a polo. And I agree. I think there's, it's almost like that suit of armor, that Superman suit. You know, it makes you look good, feel good, right? I think it's important. I love when coaching staffs do that. I love when I see the team does that, when they all come out with the same style and color of uniform. There used to be, I'm not sure where it actually started. I heard a podcast somewhere of somebody who took credit for it, but when I was coaching down in Florida, West Palm Beach High School, I believe the head coach's name was Jeremy Groover. They were kind of hurdle high. They had Antoinette Wilkes, a couple other amazing hurdlers, Jasper Demps, who we saw, he was a 13-7 kid and stuff. But they had a ton of good kids. And on the finals of the state meet, so they would wear, I think they were maroon and white. On Friday, they would wear a maroon. And then on Saturday, they all had like their maroon warm-ups until they got to the start line. And then they took off their warm-ups and they were all white. And it was like everybody, you see everybody in the stands, like, because, they were so good. They had like 2 or 3 kids in the 100 hurdle finals and the 100 finals and stuff. Everybody would look and be like, oh, what is this? The kids were like, wait a minute, this ain't the same kid, man. It's got better. So I do love that presence. I did want to bring that up. I was going to make fun of Coach Zoe, because right now he's the exact opposite. But then I peeped his shirt, though, and it is one of my favorite shirts. I'm actually jealous that I didn't get one. So it was hard to. I literally was like, oh man, I'm gonna make fun of Coach. And I was like, oh, look at his shirt though. He wore a good one at least, So. Okay, let's keep going. Exactly. So let's keep going. So you coached club, and that's interesting. I knew you were a big club coaching before you came to college. I didn't know the length of it. So 20 plus years. It sounded like coaching club.
27 years.
Yeah. Before you got into college coaching, and that's unique, because there's a lot of club coaches out there right now that are like, oh man, I can't coach college track. They won't take me serious. They won't give me a shot. Here you coached club for 27 years and then got into college coaching. So the first stop was at Eastern. Is that correct?
No, first stop was at Kent State.
Kent State. Okay. So how'd that come about? How'd you get that job, and why? I mean,
well, as I got a little bit later into my club coaching career, I started to think about, wanting to do this for a living, and I, had a couple of different jobs, and I said, I started thinking about that. And that's, to me, always, like I tell my kids, when things are going to happen when they're supposed to happen, not when you want them to happen. So I started thinking about it, and I probably could have started coaching collegiately long before I did. Going out and putting out resumes and calling people and things like that. But I wanted to do it the old school way. I wanted people to recognize my talent and notice it and say, hey, do you want a job? And that's the way I did it. So I figured I used to take my club kids up to Kent State in the winter, some of the high school kids and younger, and they would be up there and they would compete really well with college athletes, and that's what got me noticed. I'd go around different places and some of the high school kids would beat some of the college kids. And so Steve Rainbolt, that was the head coach at Kent State at the time. It's a great guy.
Great
He gave
guy.
me my first, yeah, he is. I love that guy. And he gave me my first opportunity. And I'll always appreciate that from him. And every time I see him, I tell him, hey, man, thanks for giving me an opportunity. He called me. There was a young lady at Kent State. She was a jumps coach, I believe. And she ended up leaving and getting another job. I believe she went to Penn State. And that the job as a jumps coach was open. So he gave me a call. I don't know how he got my number. I don't know, because I had just started coaching. I coached for 1 year in 99. I started coaching high school for 1 year at Woodland Hills High School. And a couple of guys on the team, Lusaka Polite, he ended up going to Pitt for football, but he played pro for about 9 years for the Dallas Cowboys. I think he was a fullback for Dallas Cowboys. He was on the team at Woodland Hills, and Shante Spencer was on my team at Woodland Hills, and he ended up coming to Pitt as well to play football. And I think he played for 9 or 10 years for the San Francisco 49ers. But I coached for 1 year, cross country and track for Woodland Hills. And that's right after the season was over, I got a call from Steve Rainbolt, asked me if I was interested in coming up and applying or looking at a job as a jumps coach. And so I went up there on an interview, and the rest was history from that point. He hired me, and I was a jumps coach there.
Was part of the interview process going to the golf course?
No, he's a big golf guy, but no, he didn't take me there. If you want to talk about golf, though, this guy on the screen, Coach Zoe, he's a big golf guy. I've never picked up a club. Did anything. So
I was going to say, Coach Webb, I'm more like you. I was going to say, unfortunately, Coach Zoe, as much as you maybe love golf, I am the exact opposite, man. Yeah. It's funny.
The love-hate.
Oh, yeah. Hate, I think is more of the term. Yeah. First time I tried golfing, an athlete of mine who was kind of like my little brother, he was a golfer, and he's like, oh, it's so relaxing. You'll have fun. Let's go. And so we went out to the little 9-hole at Troy. I've never swore and cussed so much. It's terrible, man. Terrible. I just know Coach Bolt, golfer extraordinaire. I mean, he does not miss an opportunity. So I was like, that's probably part of his interview process. So you had mentioned, this is interesting about, when you first were getting into track, you said you were more kind of distance. You mentioned some sprinters and hurdlers and jumpers. It sounds like you were kind of coaching everything. Like you couldn't have been pigeonholed at that point. You couldn't have said you were a jumps coach or a sprints coach.
That's correct.
Did that hurt or help as you are interviewing for the jumps position at Kent?
I think it helped me because when I started my own club, River City Elite in 93, I started with my daughter. My daughter and my niece were the first two, and then I started that way. But then when I got into, I was as my club grew, I got into coaching all the events because I was the only coach. So I would coach them through cross country, and then they would go into track, and I would coach them their track events. And as the club grew, I started coaching everything. I was coaching distance, I was coaching throws, jumps, hurdles, sprints, everything. And I think that helped me. It really helped me as a coach, as an overall coach. But when I interviewed with the position at Kent State, I don't think it hurt at all. He never mentioned anything else. And I was a jumper anyways. I was a jumper when I was in high school. I was a high jump, long jumper, triple jumper in high school. And when I went to college, I did the same thing. And I went to Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo. And my last year there, I was a decathlete in the MAC. So, I was pretty well-rounded and all that.
Yeah, we skipped right over your college career. I did not know you were a Western Michigan alum, because
Yeah.
that has its own, as a men's track athlete at Western Michigan, it has its own bad connotations, of course, when they drop the
Right.
program. And, I assume we have fellow friend Dale Cowper. We
Right.
all know
Yeah.
him, and he was one of the last athletes through that program and did an amazing job, and is doing an amazing job. And you ended up becoming a decathlete. That's interesting. So that
Yeah.
really helps with coaching and coaching different aspects, and really not even necessarily helps coaching, but maybe helps the mentality of like, oh, okay, well, I can coach. I may not know a lot about it, or I may not have done it real well, but I can learn it and coach it because there's a lot of similarities.
Right. Yeah. And I used to read a lot of books on coaching. I used to be in the library all the time, day and night. I'd just be in there, and at home I'd be reading things, reading books, take books out of the library, reading about all the different events, because I wanted to coach it all. I wanted to be pretty well-rounded and be the best I could, to be the best coach I could for all the athletes that would come through my program.
So a library, folks, is a paper version of YouTube. We used to have to go to a building to read and not just open up our laptops or our cell phones to get coaching education. But that is, and Coach Zoe, your generation of coaching is tremendously different than Coach Webb's here, right? Because we used to really have to pursue coaching education. Now, coaching education is so liquid and fluid, like you can't help but touch it. It's almost now where it's like, oh, you don't do any coaching education. Like, you got to actively try not to do coaching education when you talk about the convention and the speakers that we have there, and USATF coaches ed, USTFCCA coaches ed, Altus education. I mean, there's so much out there. So that's interesting.
I think there's something to be said though about still going back and reading. And if you came into my office, the entire file cabinet behind me, top half is all on paper. I mean, it's every single event. A bad glare, but everything up here on top of this bookshelf are books that were written in the 70s and 80s, and I read through them
now.
Still,
I ask everybody who has the library behind them, did and do you actually read them, Coach Webb?
Yeah, man. Especially when I first started coaching, for sure.
Yeah.
Now I go golf instead, but
yeah, I read it. I know it. I don't need to read it again. Yeah. So Alonzo, talk to us about the Coach Webb. Talk to us about the Kent State. What were some of the differences? Because you did 27 years of coaching club, and that is different than coaching college. What were some of the struggles, and what were some of the like bread and butter, easy stuff? Like, oh, this is just like coaching club.
Yeah, it was easy because when I finally disbanded my club, I probably had close to 100 athletes on my club. And that's so when I finished that, and I got the job at Kent State, and I believe I had probably about 10 or 12 athletes, in the jumps between both men and women. And I was bored to tears because I only had 12 people to coach. It was so easy, and just one discipline,
right?
The jumps. I said, this is a piece of cake. And this is honest to goodness truth. I felt, for probably the first 2 years, I felt bad. I felt like I was robbing them because they were actually paying me to do something that I would have done for free. And it was so easy. I only had 12 people to coach. It was just amazing. So I just sat in the office and then, got my recruiting done and things like that. But it was just a piece of cake, just having 12 athletes to coach after coaching close to 100 athletes, on my club.
Yeah.
It was just so easy.
That's interesting. There's a lot of debate of college coaches hiring or not hiring high school coaches to coach on the college level and club coaches. And the knock is always, one of the first things anybody generally says is, oh, well, the recruiting aspect. But I didn't think about that other aspect of like a club coach. Like, yeah, you could easily be coming from 100 athletes where you're touching every one of the disciplines. Like, oh, now I get to focus you on just a certain bandwidth, sprints and hurdles or jumps, and you get to really dive deep into that. And high school coach, like, to me, it's always a little bit of a farce about not considering a high school coach, because it's like, do you know what that high school coach does? They teach all day and coach, grade papers, deal with disciplining kids, recruit to their team. Like, they're pretty prepared. Like, as long as they're doing,
absolutely,
they're actually coaching acumen's good. They're well prepared for a lot of college opportunities. Let's not kid ourselves. I think sometimes
Right.
maybe we think as college, and former college coach here, guilty of this, by the way, of thinking we have like this mystery job, like, oh, what we do is so special. It's secret sauce stuff here. And while we definitely as college coaches do stuff and go through stuff that's unique, this ain't rocket science. Let's not overstate what we do. So at Kent State, you did pretty well. And the reason I know that is because while you were at Kent State, I was coaching against you for 2 seasons on the women's side at Ball State University. I was lucky enough to have, I don't know if you remember this name, Patricia Soman. In the long jump, triple jump, 22 plus, absolutely. 43 plus. Yeah, I was very, very lucky to have her. It was, I kind of like, it's one of those coaching jobs where it's like, yeah, here's the runway. Now go jump and win. And I'll go work on the other events. So, but lots of great battles. In fact, my last year, I believe, indoor was at Kent State, and we lost to you guys the team title by 0.66. We got a 8th place tie on the pole vault, so we got like 0.33 points, but we lost by like less than a point. And my 60 meter gal in the finals fault started, which would have done it.
Wow.
And I just remember, the meet's over, you lose by less than a point. The home team is all cheering. They got the trophy, and you got second, which is not terrible. It's not beat,
right.
And it just felt terrible because it's like, she felt terrible because she false started. You start second guessing every event, like, oh man, we could have gotten 6th instead of 7th there. And you guys the Golden Flashes were just happy as could be at their home place.
Yes, we were.
So
if you talk to her, tell her thanks anyway. So
that's terrible. Oh man, that's terrible. Love it. Great kids, man. I always say, I went from Ball State to Mississippi State, and I loved my time at Mississippi State. The now former head coach Al Schmidt was like a dad and is like a dad to me. But if I would have stayed at Ball State, I think I'd still be in coaching. I mean, the MAC is a pretty special conference.
Absolutely.
When it comes to the athletes and where they are athletically versus like Power 5 versus, other divisions. That was a real special place. I really did enjoy my time there and enjoyed my time with Sue Parks actually as well. It's special memories for me being in that conference.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did it go? What did we do? Why didn't we ended up moving somewhere? Why did we move, and where did we go?
Yeah, I was there for 3 years, 99 through 2002. And Coach Rainbow wanted to get back to the Midwest, I guess, or out west, wherever. He wanted to get back to Kansas. So he got a job out there. Where's that? With the Shockers at Wichita State.
The Shockers, that's right, Wichita State.
Yeah. So he left and went out there. And Wendell McRaven, who's at the distance coach at Texas A&M, he was on his staff before I came. And so the job was open. The head coaching job at Kent State was open. And I said, what the heck? I've only been coaching for 3 years as a head coach. I'm going to apply for the head coaching job. And so I applied for the head coaching job, and so did Wendell. And they gave the head coaching job to Wendell. And rightfully so. I mean, he was there longer than I was, and he did a great job. So he got the head coaching job. And they elevated me after the first 2 years. After the first year, actually, first year. Because I was only there for 99 with Rainbow. He left after 99 year.
Okay.
And then the job was open. So I applied for it. Wendell applied for it. Wendell got it. And then they elevated me to associate head coach after my first year. And that was kind of a big deal. And everybody was saying, well, how's it? And they didn't know my backstory about me coaching club track for 27 years. Right. So they said, how in the world did this club guy just get into coaching? And he's also already an associate head coach after 1 year. Again, they didn't know the 27 years I put in before that. So, and then going from an assistant jumps coach, then I took over sprints and hurdles and multi-events as well. So I started coaching all. So then I had a majority of the team I was coaching. Wendell coached the distance runners, and I coached just about everybody else, with the exception of the throws. And that was Kent Pagel, I believe. Kent Pagel was there. Kent and Ramona Pagel were the throws coaches there. So they were coaching the throws. I coached everybody else. jumps, sprints, hurdles, and multis.
That feels more back to your club roots there.
Yeah.
Now you got 30 athletes.
In my wheelhouse. Yeah. Yeah. I was feeling good about that, So, but that was there. And then once in the head coaching job at Pitt came open in 2002. And then, I said, being able to get back home to Pittsburgh, and I loved every moment that I was in at Kent State. I could have stayed there forever. Great facilities, great university, everything was great there. But I said, in order to get back home and be a head coach in my hometown, that's special to me. So I applied for the job and was fortunate enough to get the job in 2002. And so I went back to Pittsburgh in 2002.
How many years were you the associate head with Wendell being the head? Was that
2 years?
So
2 years. So I was just a jumps coach in '99 with Steve Rainbolt as head coach. He left after my first year. I was there for basically 9 months, and he left and went out to Wichita State. And so 2000, I guess it was 2001 or whatever it is. I'm not sure the date.
Yeah.
But for 2 years, I was an associate head coach.
So help
and
us.
I left it. Yeah.
Help us dispel this myth then, because so that you got a lot of unique, besides your bow tie, you have a lot of uniquenesses here, Coach Webb. So there's this myth, and obviously there's some truths to it in some certain situations, but when two people on a staff interview for a head coaching job and one of them gets it, there's this myth that it's automatic the other person is gone. And not voluntarily all the time, right? It's like, well, that guy wanted my job. By the way, it wasn't even your job. You both applied for it.
Right.
But it's automatic. But you guys, and I know Wendell very well, great guy. You guys, I don't want to say coexisted because that sounds like you guys tolerated each other, but you guys, you thrived. I mean, you went on for 2 years and had a great program. You didn't leave because you didn't get the job. You left because a great opportunity, head coach and going home. No one's going to fault you for that. So dispel this myth. How did you guys get over, if there was anything to get over, of, oh, you both went for the job. One person didn't get it. One person did, but I still want you on my staff. I still want to work together with you. How did that dispel that myth for us?
Well, I think Wendell and I have always had a great relationship, and we still do after all these years, 20 something years. But I think as assistant coaches, I mean, he was just a hard worker. Brad Hunt was there as well. You remember Brad?
Yes.
So Brad was there. So we had a great dynamic as a staff, man. I mean, Steve Rainbolt made it so easy. He was down to earth and so low key, and he was such a competitive guy. And Wendell was competitive, Brad, myself, we were all really super competitive guys. And we just wanted that team to be the best it could be, And so Wendell and I always had a great relationship. And I don't know, I never even asked him, didn't even think about it, what his feelings were when he got the job and he felt like, he applied for it. I don't know. I mean, I don't even know that he I applied for it. I don't, I'm serious. I don't.
Wendell's
applied for it.
Wendell's listening right now going, what the? You're going to get a phone call. Be like, hey, man.
Yeah. Hey, man, what are you trying to do, man?
But I love that. So, because we can look at both sides of that. Let's say Wendell knew, let's say he did. He probably knew. Let's be frank here, right? He either had animosity or didn't, right? So even if he did and was like, hey, this guy also applied, I got to watch my back. Well, he's now the head coach. He has the ability to, quote unquote, solve that problem. Hey, Coach Webb, appreciate your time here. We're going to go in a different direction. Stop me if you ever heard that before in your coaching life, right? Or he had that animosity, and animosity is a strong word. He had that ego issue. That's what it really comes down to.
Yeah, right.
Or he, again, had that ego issue and was able to quickly quail that part of the ego and be like, oh, wait a minute. This guy wasn't after my job. It wasn't my job. It was a job, and we both applied. He's a great coach and a good, probably friend at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a better team with him on my staff. Let's keep. I want to keep him. What in the world here? What would I be thinking just because he applied for a job that I applied for? So I love that. I love that again, that dispelling of the myth that, it's first of all, it was not your job. If you got the head coaching job, it was not your job. It was a job. Both people applied for it. If that's the right person to be on your staff, keep that person. Have a conversation with them if you really think it's an issue.
Yeah. And I would hope to think that that was the way it was. He saw me as a great coach, and was doing a good thing for the program. And, he said, hey, we're going to keep winning championships, And so that was it. I hope that's what he was thinking, if anything.
Yeah, I love that, man. I did not know that. That's again, that's that one of those myths out there that it's an automatic. You two people from the same staff, the other one's got to go. And I love that there was, for whatever the behind the scenes, let's be fair, we haven't talked to Wendell, so we don't know what his thinking was.
Right.
But kudos to Wendell that whatever way he was thinking, it worked, that both people coexisted. And again, that gives me like a tolerated vibe. So I don't want to say coexisted, thrived together, continued to move forward the program and the staff. I love that. That's a kumbaya, 4-star story right there, man. I love that.
Yeah. Well, it was good too, because I got the title of associate head coach. Didn't have to do the work. He did all the paperwork and hard work, man. I'm still doing my thing coaching, man. I got the title and I got an increase in pay. So it's a win-win for me.
You're still like, oh my, am I just getting over here? I mean, they're paying me more. You got more athletes though. So you kind of felt like, okay, well, all right, I got more athletes. Yeah. That's good. That's good. Well, so awesome. Again, I love this journey of this club coach who, again, I don't like to use the terms paid their dues, right? Because that makes it seem like being a club coach is a stepping stone or a menial job. It's a big job. I know plenty of club coaches out there. God bless you all. I did club coaching for not even for a year. I did it for half a year, and I was like, I can't do this. I'm not cut out for. I do not have the skill set for that. The patience level you must have for being a club coach is off the charts. So you thrived 27 years as a club coach, make the move to the coaching ranks, the college coaching ranks, and then within 3 years, get a big head coaching job. Now this is a Power 5 head coaching job. We're not at I'll make fun of my Omar. You didn't go to Troy University, and that's no knock on Troy University, because anybody who listens knows that's the #1 school in the world. Pittsburgh's #2. We know. But also you get to go home. That's so special. That's, we don't get those opportunities a lot of times in this profession. We go where the job is, and it's not always back home. So you're at the University of Pittsburgh. So what's it like? What's homecoming like? What's it, you're head coach now, not associate head. You are the head of your own program in a big time conference. What do you think the first month you're there and you get the lay of the land? What's the roster look like, the budgets, schedules? Did you kind of have a, oh gosh, maybe I should have stayed in Kent, Ohio moment? Or was it like, oh yeah, it's go time?
Well, I said it's go time, because the situation was they had let the entire staff go at Pitt in 2002. Steve Lewis was the head coach there for about 20 years, and they ended up letting the whole staff go there. And so when I got there, I hadn't had any experience with all the things that Wendell was doing. I was like, thank goodness I don't have to do that. I had no clue of what Wendell was doing as far as the paperwork and scholarships and budgets and all those kinds of things. Had zero clue. So when I got to Pitt, there was there was one person left that was on the staff there. He was a distance coach, Waddy Freeman. And
Waddy,
Waddy Freeman, really good friend of mine, a great friend of mine. So he was still there. He was the only one that was left on the staff, because they had to leave somebody to sort of handle recruiting.
Waddy had to show you where the office was. Here's where the bathroom is. This is how you get to the AD's office, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right. And he was such a blessing to me to be there and to help me through that. He was a great recruiter. He was great with the budgets and all those kinds of things. And he really taught me all the office things I had to do along the way. So he was a big help. But I had to hire all the staff. So I basically said, I'm going to hire the best coaches I could in all the events. And then whatever is left over, I'll coach. So that's basically what it was. Because I got hired in there in August of 2002. And so school was going to get ready to start. School started at the end of August. So I believe I was hired August 12th of 2002. So when I got there.
And a lot of coaches have their contract for the upcoming year, or they're set for the school year. Yeah, that's a tough time to be hiring. Yeah.
Right. So I was sort of behind the eight ball as far as that goes. Like I said, it was really good to have Waddy Freeman there to, sort of guide me through everything. And so I had to hire staff, and I did that. And I said, I'll hire the best staff I could. And if it was a throws coach I had to be, I'll be the throws coach. So it ended up being that I was able to hire staff everybody except the jumps. So I was a jumps coach, which was, in my wheelhouse when I got to Pitt.
The multi-levelness of your coaching, what a strength. It cracks me up when I see we're going to talk about the message boards here, everybody. When there's a post for a job, and it's not, it doesn't say sprints. It says coaching track and field at a Division I level, and it's the situation you're describing there. It's like, hey, if you're a great throws coach, apply. I'll put you in the throws because I can go coach the sprints now or whatnot.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, it's so general. They don't know what they want. And it's like, no, well, you're actually the exact opposite. It is the greatest situation because it means you have at least one person, but multiple people on the staff that are diverse enough that they can coach. They can coach, period. Not
right.
Coach sprints, not coach distance, not coach, period. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And you almost had to have that at that situation, right? Because you were so behind the eight ball, so late in the hiring year that, you had to get the best of each one that you could and not turn down a sprints coach because you're the sprints coach, right?
Right. Yeah. And I didn't, at the time, we didn't have a full staff either. I didn't get a full staff probably until at least 5 years in, maybe longer than that. I can't remember when it was, but I was full-time. I had a full-time distance coach, which is Waddy Freeman. I had a part-time pole vault coach. He taught high school during the day, and he came down and coached pole vault and javelin for me. And I believe I had a full-time sprint coach, and that was it. So we had basically 3 full-time staff, and the other was guys who were part-time. And again, it wasn't until many years later that I was actually get up to a full six people on the staff at full-time.
You started Pittsburgh 2003 season, is that right?
2002.
2002 season, or 2002 fall?
The fall of 2002, August of 2002.
So 03 season. So that means this is your 18th season there, right?
No, it should be getting ready to start my 20th.
20,
right?
Okay. Yeah. I went to school in Alabama, so math is hard. So we're just going to say 20.
I think so.
No, it's perfect.
02 to 03. So I might be 19 or 20.
Yeah. So let's fast forward a little bit because you then have to recruit, and somewhere probably, I don't know, you got to tell me the ages, somewhere maybe around 2014, 2015, you got to recruit some kid named Alonzo Webb the third to your team, right? So Coach Zoe,
I wish I was that young.
Yeah. Hey, when you become my age, everybody's young. Even Coach Webb, I'm like, you're young, whatever. So I don't want to say when did you come onto the scene, Coach Zoe, because you're a son, so you've been on the scene for quite a while. But so where were you? Are you? I know you ran for Pittsburgh. So when you were in high school, was Dad coaching you, or was that a completely did you do a good you did a good job of separating yourself, Coach Webb, as
he did.
Dad versus coach? How did that dynamic play out in high school for you?
Yeah, it worked out pretty well for me. I started doing track when I was five and a half. I ran my first cross country season at 5 and a half. So I had been running my entire life. Somewhere along the way, I realized if I switch events, it gets a little easier. So I just dabbled in the jumps a little bit, started doing the multi when I was young, and then started high jumping. And then, somewhere along the way, I was like, I should try a different sport. So my first year of high school, I actually stopped doing track and decided to play football. And I was like, people get to just hit me for no reason in practice. This is terrible.
And you didn't do track?
Yeah, I didn't, man. It was the first year of my
How dare you?
Life, basically.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, then football reality hit you, right?
Yeah. I was like, I don't like this thing. I was good at it, but I didn't like getting hit. It just seemed silly to me. So 10th grade, I went back to track, and I was lucky enough that one of the guys that, Coach Webb had coached at Pitt was from the area. And so he came back to Kent and was our high school coach, but wasn't really there all the time. But my junior year, he was there all the time, and it was really nice. Basically, my dad sent me workouts, and he was able to kind of just guide through it. But in reality, I was coaching myself and coaching my teammates in the jumps, which was awesome because I got an opportunity to coach. I coached my teammate to jump way higher than me. So it was, one of those things that I just got back into sport, and, my dad never forced me. Coach Webb never forced me. He never pushed it. You have to do this. Here's your workouts. You better do them. It was, I reached out and he said, hey, here's some things you can do. If your teammates need some things to do, here's how you can guide them through it. So
you did high school in Ohio.
Yeah, I went to Kent Roosevelt. It was a interesting scenario. Basically, I guilted my dad. He let my siblings finish high school in Kent. And so I kind of guilted him and let me finish in Kent. And luckily, my mom had a pretty good job there as well. So, he leaves out the part of how good of a dad he was during that. As great of a coach he was, he's a really good dad. He let me, stay and finish in Kent, but he drove back and forth almost every weekend that he didn't have a track meet or wasn't recruiting. He drove back and forth to Kent pretty often.
Hey,
allowed me to do that.
We can't say that loud enough. Let's shout that out here for a second. Yeah. It's easy to talk about this right here in this situation, right? Because we've got son and dad right here in front of us, and both are in this great profession of coaching track and field. But, as all the coaches that we talk to in the podcast and all the coaches who listen and are out there, your most important role, and I'll say most important roles over coaching, is mom or dad, son or daughter, husband, wife. I mean, those far outweigh the title of coach. It's interesting. Coach is one of only 2 titles that I can think of in a profession that we have an actual title for, right? Like, you don't call your banker Joe. You say it's Joe, my banker, right? Yeah. But doctor is one. It's Dr. Smith. You don't call him Joe. It's Dr. Smith. And coach, it's all, it's not Alonzo. It's Coach Webb, right? I mean, it's really interesting, and that sometimes because of that title and how important that title is, and the 24/7ness of coaching and coaching track and field, we sometimes lose sight that, that's number 3 at best. Like, there's dad, mom, son, daughter, husband, wife first. So I love that, we get to honor that here as we're, maybe a month or so now off of Father's Day. But that's super important. And I love that, track and athletics can bring us together as a family, but also can divide us. Right. And I love that it obviously continue to bring and you guys together. Yeah. So wanted to sorry to interrupt you there. Yeah, so that is super important. Yeah. That needs to be shouted out more than what
I agree.
So Coach Webb, how did you, it doesn't sound like Zoe's high school was really well regimented. There's some great high school programs out there, right, that have full staffs and they're coaching. They're doing an amazing job. Seemed a little, what I heard a little bit disjointed in regards to coaching and stuff like that. Coach Webb, how did you how did you separate dad from coach? Meaning you didn't overstep your bounds and be like, hey guys, all right, so my this is my son, and so this is his team. Well, I'm going to coach, or I'm going to tell you, coach, who's there, how to coach. How did you kind of like let him almost chart his own journey on that side without overstepping?
Yeah, I think it was important for him to understand he doesn't need me, to be successful. And like I said, I sent him workouts, like he was saying, hey, Dad, what can I do to get better? I sent him stuff, and that he took it from there. So I was never going to impose my will or my authority on anybody. So that's not my position. That's not my job. So I had enough going on, at Pitt to not worry about those kinds of things. And like he said too, we have 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls. The 2 girls are the oldest, and my 2 boys are the youngest. And Coach Zoe being my youngest. But my son Justin was going to be a senior in high school when I got the job at Pitt, and he said, "Hey, Dad, can we stay here?" He said, "I know you got the job at Pitt, but can I stay here and graduate with my class because these are the people I started school with?" And I said, "Sure, sure, son, go ahead, and I'll just drive back and forth from Kent to Ohio, from Kent to Pittsburgh, back and forth as much as I can, and we'll just keep the house here and stay there." And then once he graduated, I said, "Okay, now it's time to move to Pittsburgh." And then Coach Zoe says, "Hey, Dad, I only have 2 more years, at Pitt, and these are the people I started school with.
It worked for
course,
Justin.
Right. Yeah. So
Figured I'd try it myself.
and it worked. So, so I said, okay, son, we'll stay another 2 years. We'll stay in Kent another 2 years. You can graduate with your class. And that's what we did. And then once, he finished there, and I think my wife, she had a job there in Ohio that she loved. And I think we actually stayed even another year because she didn't want to leave her job. So it was basically, I think, a total of 5 years that we stayed while I was working at Pitt. And I made that trip back and forth as much as I could, back and forth every day or whatever, or when I wasn't at meets or things. So I mean, that's how it went.
It's funny to laugh about it. And, of course, now, hindsight's 2020, it's easy to laugh and joke about it now, but the sacrifice coaches make in that sense, and dad here in this sense of like, man, my kids are going through high school. As much as, how far of a drive Pittsburgh to Kent?
It was just under 2 hours.
Oh, okay.
Each way.
Terrible, but still,
yeah.
2 hours, not 20 minutes.
It's about 2 hour drive. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there had to be things, as much as you did make, there had to be things you missed, especially as a track coach. You're traveling and recruiting, et cetera. I mean, the sacrifice coaches make with their families is tremendous in those instances. There, I have about like 10 other coaches in my head right now that I know spent a year plus away from their family while their kids graduated or for other reasons, businesses were going on, et cetera. And it just, it breaks my heart. I'm so glad that, the end story here is that we're stronger together and we're together, but it's just so, I couldn't imagine right now, I've got a 10 and a 7-year-old. I could not imagine going away for a year and they just stay here and live their life. Like I'm part of I want to be part of it. It's tough. It's really tough. It's really tough. So, Alonzo, coach, so was it automatic you were going to go to Pittsburgh for undergrad, or what was,
no. I loved school. I was a nerd. I was a nerd at the time.
I was about to say, I'm going to give a shout out to Coach Webb then. I mean, that's family. That's mom and dad right there. If you love school, that's parents, building that into you. Wow. Sure. Okay.
Yeah. We have really, really high expectations.
We are the opposite people here. So holy cow. Okay.
But I love school. And it was one of those things where I was actually looking at Ivy Leagues. I wanted to, of course, do track, but it was more of the education that I was looking for. And then as I was looking a little bit deeper, it just, one of my teammates at Kent Roosevelt went to Pitt, and he talked about, how much he loved it at Pitt, and, he loved running for my dad. I'm like, he was so hard on us, he wouldn't let us do anything. You love him now, and it was hilarious. So I'm like, okay, maybe, Pitt is somewhere I can see myself. And then we just sat down and had an honest conversation one day, and my dad told me, hey, if you want your education paid for and not to worry about, things in the future, go to Pitt. You can go to, Ivy League school. That's fine. You can probably get your education paid for. You have to get a job and all these things. And, he kind of told me to look at the big picture of, the future.
Yes.
And so I started looking more into it, and, I loved, the team that was there. I knew them all very, very well. So I decided, I'll put myself in that position no one ever wants to be, and don't get coached by your parents, But at the time, he had just hired a different jumps coach, and he switched over to sprints and hurdles. So for me, it was like, okay,
so you were over in that jumps,
a little separation, so I can go there and feel a little more comfortable, even in that regard. So
it's tough it's tough as a dad coach, right? Because you want what's best. Well, in your dad, so you have to inherently feel like I'm going to do what's best for my son, but you're also raising a young man, and this is number 4 that you're raising young man, young woman into the world. They have to make their own decisions. We had Dwayne Ross, from North Carolina A&T, and he was talking about his recruiting process with his son and daughter, and his son was recruited by anybody would take Randolph Ross, right? 43 point proves it all, right?
Yeah.
And he, and he expressed how he's like, I did not push. He's like, if he wanted to go to wherever, I won't name schools, he went to those visits, and He had to make his own decision. And he's like, of course I wanted him at my school, I wanted him with
Right,
me.
of course.
And maybe luckily for everybody that worked out. So, he goes to
Yeah.
NCAA. It seems to be working out so far. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So you go to Pitt. What are you? So you said you said you love school. Didn't see that quote coming from anybody.
Weird, huh?
Very weird. Yeah. When I picked my major going into college, I literally was like, what is the easiest major to do? And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, PE sounds kind of easy. And then I got to public relations. I was like, oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, what did you end up majoring in? And where are you? You've got a great role model in this profession and your dad. Where are you in relation thought process as a profession? Like, are you like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a track coach, or did you have other thoughts?
I was very far from it. I didn't want to coach. I never saw myself coaching. It's weird. I was split. My mom is math, finance, like that's where she's at. And my dad was art, it was photography. It was all those things. It was entrepreneurial. I mean, he leaves out a lot of the things he also did along the way. But I was thinking, I wanted to be a photographer. That's what I wanted to do. That's why I was going to school. Those are the schools I was looking for. All had photography. Pitt didn't. I'm like, all right, well, I want to go to Pitt. I made this decision. I'll just find something else to do. Mm-hmm. So I decided to go into business. I almost majored in math, and then I realized that's a terrible decision. So I actually was going to major in business, and just along the way, I just ended up doing communications instead. And communications was definitely the route that I'm happy I took that, because it pays off on a daily basis for me.
I studied public relations, and I mean, look what I do all day now. Right. Exactly. So when as you're going through undergrad and your business and communications, when did it flip like, okay, I'm going to be a coach, or did it at all? I mean, I don't know if you did grad work or maybe you went somewhere else before you came on staff.
No, it was one of those things where when I graduated college, it was, my parents have, like I said, they gave us a great structure of how we operate in life. And one of those things, when you graduate, you have to find a job. Like but use your education, find a job. If you're going to live in, I moved back home. If you're going to live in my house, you have to get a job. So I just started applying for jobs. I'm like, okay, well, I know I got a communications degree. I'm going to look for jobs in this realm. And we have an amazing life skills program. Pitt's life skills program, #1 in the country, especially at the time. It was the most staffed, most funded. It was the first robust life skills program. So we had a lot of career education opportunities. Most of the connections I made were actually in banking and more on that business side. So I interviewed for a lot of jobs. I was getting, callbacks and all these things. I'm like, this is a terrible process. It's looking for jobs thing, man. This is awful. So I sat down with our life skills guy, and he was just, telling me be patient. He's like, but what do you love to do? What do you have a passion to do? And I just said, I want to be able to impact people. I want to be able to help people grow. And my jumps coach had actually left in the middle of my senior year, and I got injured. And so I was helping my teammates a lot. Coach Webb had a lot of people he was coaching at the time. So he put me in charge of the group, basically. I put them through their workouts. I was there to watch them, and he came over and, got them better. And I was managing, in a sense, I would say. And, my the life skills guy, Penny Samaya, he told me, hey, man, there's an opening. Ask your dad if you can volunteer or work with his staff while you decide what you want to do. See if you do enjoy coaching, because you said you want to impact and help other people. I was like, well, it's a okay idea, but I kind of drug my feet on it a little bit. And then, I sat down that fall and asked my dad if there would be opportunity. And it was, he wanted to hire me. I was like, well, you want to throw me in the fire here?
Coach Webb's like, I got the power. Let's just make it happen.
Yeah. And administration, was a little bit unsure. So he's like, okay, just volunteer for me, and, we'll figure everything else out. And so I decided to volunteer, and it's the best decision I ever made, for sure.
So how did he operate with you as a volunteer coach? So as an undergrad, and it's kind of I don't know if it's an unfair position to put a kid in. Again, it's unique because father and son here. But as an undergrad, as a college senior and whatnot, to be in charge of a group, whether you're managing it or not, that's a step above being a team captain and leader. But sure. Now you're a volunteer, so like now you're quote unquote a legit coach in that sense, right? So did you have autonomy over a group, or how did did you shadow and under dad as a mentor? Now, because now you have to be thinking a little differently about track and field, right? It's not just how do you jump far. It's like, oh, there's a whole process to it. Like maybe you see it differently.
My first year, he sat down with me in the office and said, here's your group, figure it out. I said, okay. He said, I'll be there to guide you. I have a book of workouts. I have all these things I've done throughout my career. His resources, you can have them. He said, coaching, one of the first things he said is that coaching is an art. Everyone talks about the science of coaching and the numbers. It's an art. It's like, so I want you to be able to get in there and figure it out, and you can learn the other things along the way. And that, trial by fire for sure. But it worked out for me. My first year went really, really well, but I always had a guiding hand. If I had a question, he was there. The other coaches on the staff were great resources. If I ever seemed like I was struggling or couldn't figure something out, they were all there. So he put some really good people around me, and I was able to handle my group very well, I would say personally.
So was that volunteer assistant year, was that then the year like, okay, it clicked, now I'm a college coach, or at least I'm a track coach?
Definitely. I stopped looking for other jobs. I stopped all the processes of trying to find a different career, and I decided track and field was going to be my career. And it wasn't just the being able to coach part. It was, I'm 22 years old. I have a pretty decent sized freshman class that my previous coach had put together in the jumps group, and those young kids to me now, but at the time kind of peers, they clung to me and they trusted me with everything, and so just building those relationships that easily, I decided coaching track and field is where I wanted to be.
So Coach Webb, Zoe talked about he never wanted to be like, coaching was not like, if he could have picked 5 professions as a 16-year-old, it does not sound like any of those 5 would have been coaching, banking, photographer, et cetera. Right. As he was growing up and, becoming, through high school and becoming more mature as a young adult, and now he's in college and, he is an adult. Did you see this coming along? Did you always kind of in the background, like, go apply for that banking job, I'll see you back on the track, son? Or did it kind of catch you out of the blue as well as a surprise?
Yeah, it was a surprise to me. I actually thought he was going to go into like finance or something like that, because that was his love. I think, at least I thought that was his love, the finance part of it. So I didn't see it coming. And as I saw it, I thought like when he was finished with his collegiate career, and he came to me and we talked about it, like he said. I said, well, I told him you can volunteer for me until you figure it out. I thought it was going to be a stop along the way until we figured out what he really wanted to do. So I said, you can volunteer for me, and then once you figure it out, you can go do what you wanted to do. And I was okay with that, And then along the way, and he caught the coaching bug, he caught fire, and he did a great job right away. And I think he was kind of it was kind of tough being a 22-year-old, and then 1 month you're on the team with these guys and hanging out with them and playing video games, and then the next week, you're coaching them and saying, hey, you got to do this and stay away from all these other bad things, So they were his peers, he was on the team with these guys, and now he's coaching them. And he was a little bit concerned if they would validate him and say, hey, you're a coach now, or you're just Alonzo, we're not going to listen to you. But they had so much respect for him. And like he said, when he was injured his senior year, he was helping them along their path, and they respected him because he knew what he was talking about, and knew how to impart the knowledge to him. So they felt very comfortable once he started coaching them. But he was a little bit concerned with if they were going to respect him as a coach because he was their age and on a team with them. But it just flowed just so easily.
So put a pin in that, because I do, Zoe, want to talk about that aspect of going from athlete to coach within 24-hour period, essentially, right? Switch over.
Yeah.
You jump in a competition one day and the very next day you're writing a workout, right? So put a pin in that. But on top of that, do you think it helped or hurt your legitimacy aspect that you were the coach's son? I mean, at the end of the day, let's be real here. You were still the son. You're still the coach's son. Were there times where that helped you? Like, oh, okay, he's been around our head coach forever. He knows what he's talking about. And on that flip side, did it ever was like, oh, you know what? He's only here because he's the coach's son. Did that ever play a part in legitimizing yourself as coach, Zoe?
For sure. I mean, honestly, to the athletes, it was more of, he knows what he's talking about. He's been around this sport forever. It was one of those things where they knew that I would never be by myself. Like, I would never feel like I, couldn't figure it out. They knew what was around me. The athletes were better at that. It was more so, other coaches you would come across and like, you're coaching because that's your dad. Mm-hmm. Do you really know what you're doing? Mm-hmm. It was more of that. The athletes knew I had a resource there. They knew I had a backing. And I was a team captain for 3 years. And which is, something that I think showed them they could trust me as a person. They know I had the best interest at heart as a captain. I was the problem solver. I was the rock. So they trusted who I was as a person. And the coaching side of it, they knew I had a backing. I don't think they ever really thought that I was in over my head, because I had a group of seniors too that I was coaching along with the freshmen, and there was a gap. Those seniors, we did it together. They knew that we could figure it out together, and those freshmen just had that respect for me coming right in. It was more so the coaches outside of the program that, if anything, thought that I might not be as qualified as I was.
We were honored last year to have Brooks Johnson on the podcast, and it's still, after 100+ episodes, my favorite one, because it really it impacted me as a sales professional. A lot of times we're talking about stuff for coaches, so it's impacting other coaches, and that was the goal. But with Brooks, it not only did that for coaches who listen, but for me as a person and a man and how I carry myself, I learned a lot from Brooks. And one of the many things that stands out that he said during our time together was, if you're not in the huddle, you don't know the play. Mm-hmm. And he was referencing, like, when an athlete, if we were watching an athlete and they perform below what we, the outsiders, think he or she should have performed, well, you don't know what actually is going on, whether it's, he or she has a social issue, there's something that's weighing them down. That's why they didn't run. There's an injury, whatever. You're not in the huddle, so you don't know. So don't criticize. I think of that same thing with you, where you're talking about maybe outside people were like, oh, yeah, what's Zoe know? He's there because he's the coach's son. If he wasn't the coach's son, he don't have that job. And it's like, oh, you're not in the huddle. You don't know what's actually going on. What this kid, in that sense, the younger you, Coach Zoe, what this kid has done through high school coaching, being put in a position where you had to coach and lead, and then in college, as you go to your senior year, and you got to start coaching and leading at an early age, like, oh, you've actually got work experience, if you will, before you're hired. And then you don't get, by the way, you don't just get hired right out of undergrad. You do a volunteer year, for crying out loud. So I like that. And I like that. It doesn't sound like you let that weigh in on you either. Like second guess yourself and self-doubt yourself of your abilities and future abilities.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I pay attention. I'm one of those people, like, I soaked up everything from when I first started, running. I was 5.5 years old. And, part of the best thing about Coach Webb going to Kent State with the people there, they'll tell you, little Coach Zoe ran around that field house and was everywhere. I watched throws practice. I watched Coach Rainbolt coach. I was around Brad Hunt all the time, just running around him. I watched them. I watched the way they interact with the athletes. Right. And then in college, I was in the office probably more than most people were. So I was around the coaches. I saw what they had to do. I saw the different directions they were pulled in. So I paid attention to what coaching was before I even started coaching. And I knew that the skill set I had would work. I just didn't know that I wanted to coach. That was more, it wasn't that I didn't think I was qualified. I just didn't know if it was what I wanted to do.
Right.
And then, like I said, I've read and I've researched. When my coach had left, she left me all of her material. And she's Romanian, so there's a lot of Eastern European, a lot of different things. She left me all of her material because she knew I loved track. And so I was actually like reading stuff even when I was in college, and going through all that, the old Soviet Union ways of training and stuff like that. Like I was reading all of that. I just didn't know that I wanted to coach. So I was, I guess, more prepared than I even knew I was.
Yeah.
Not saying it was easy, because it was not, but I had enough pieces to put together already, I guess.
Yeah, there's preparedness, there's knowledge, and then there's the experience, right? And that's unfortunately the one thing you can't study for. You can read and you can talk to mentors and learn, but until you get your hands dirty and get on that track and coach, well, you can't force that. You can't put 5 years into 1 year. You just got to do it. And by the way, no one is prepared. No one comes to their first job and has 5 years of coaching experience. We're all rookies in that sense at some point in our time of stepping on that track and actually directing athletes through a warm up, through a practice, a cool down, and then a season, a book of seasons, et cetera. So one of the goals that we have here with the podcast is to bring immense amounts of value to listeners. And I didn't see this coming, but so let's separate father and son here a little bit. What I want to know is, because you both have unique experiences on both sides of this, a lot of athletes, an amount of athletes go into a GA position at their same school. So the situation of like, you're an athlete one day, you're a coach the very next day. And it's one thing when you're an athlete one day at Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh, and then you're a GA at University of Miami the next day, right? Because you've known those athletes that are on your team. You like Coach Webb, you mentioned, you're playing video games and hanging out till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and whatever you crazy kids are doing nowadays on a Saturday night. And then on Monday, you're in the office learning our rules and regulations. Maybe you're studying for the NCAA test, things like that. So I want to hear from both of you, because Coach Zoe, you've done it. You were physically that athlete that became the coach, and Coach Webb, you have done it in the sense of hiring a guy, in the sense of volunteering. Maybe you've hired some other athletes straight into GAs, or at the very least you have seen other athletes at other institutions. So what are some of if someone is considering, so here's where I want to try to help bring value to coaches. If someone is considering hiring a GA and they've got a host of candidates, and one of them is their athlete, and there's a easy way to say, well, I know that person, I coached that person, or they were on my team for the past 3, 4, 5 years, versus an outside candidate. What are some of the pitfalls to look for? What are some of the advantages? Talk us through your experiences and maybe advice to coaches who are maybe in that situation for the first time.
Yeah, well, as a head coach, when you're looking for somebody to add to your staff, and I know at Pitt, we don't have graduate assistants anymore. We had them in the past. And I actually hired, my first graduate assistant was Patrick Harding into our throws coach position. It was a part-time position as a graduate assistant. So he was already in the program. But in the past, when I've hired volunteer assistants or whatever, you want to look for the character in a person first. You want to really, their character means a lot to me, and I'm old school in that way that, you treat people with respect, you carry yourself in a certain way, and that you're honest and sincere. Those are certain things. And it's the same thing when I'm hiring an assistant coach. You look for somebody who, just like Coach Zoe, I don't know if Coach Zoe wants to eventually be a head coach at some point. But when you're having an assistant coach, most of them say, hey, I want to be a head coach. They don't understand what's all involved. You don't get to coach as much. I do actually, but most of them say they can't coach as much because they have so many other things to do. But if I'm hiring an assistant coach or a volunteer assistant, you look for somebody who has integrity, who's not afraid of hard work, who is not a prima donna, who thinks they have to have everything their way or whatever. So, and also if you want to be a great head coach one day, you have to be a great assistant coach first. You have to be the best assistant coach you can be. You have to have your head coach's back. You have to look out for him. And I always say that, the better you make your head coach look, the better you look. You know what I mean? So they should be looking to make me look the best that I can look, because that makes them look good. And so, but when I'm hiring somebody, I bring them in for an interview and I talk about, just ask them about who they are, how they got to where they are right now, and what kind of story they have, and a lot of times when you say, hey, you have 5 minutes to tell me all about yourself, and if they sit there and they're like, I don't know, that person is probably not prepared to be in this situation. But if they say, because I'll say, hey, tell me about yourself from the day you remember being born to right now, and they go through. And if they take their time and they go through, hey, so I remember when I was a little kid, I went through this, I experienced this. And as I got to high school, if you have a story along the way, then that's person you probably say, okay, I'll take a better look at this guy. But if they say, well, I remember just, I don't know a whole lot. I don't remember a whole lot about growing, then that person is probably not experienced enough to be able to be in this position to handle the kind of things that they need to handle. And it's the same thing with recruits. You want to find out how much they really experienced. And if they haven't experienced much, then they're probably not ready to do this job. That's just my philosophy on things.
So I heard two things. One is you said you're old school in the sense of believing in respecting, and I'm going to paraphrase here a little bit, giving grace and love and compassion to other people. First of all, if that's true, that's old school, we need to make that new school, people. We need to make it cool that you can love on people and give grace to people and have compassion for people. I love old school, new school type stuff, but that just needs to be school, I guess, right? That just needs to be life right there. So yeah. I love that. Second, I'm going to say it back how I heard you say about hiring, in that the sense of you're hiring mature individuals. So if they were like, if you were doing a grad assistant at Pittsburgh and you were looking at one of your athletes and you've known that athlete for 3, 4, 5 years, if they're not mature enough, you're not going to hire them as a grad assistant just because they're a Panther alum. Like, they're not mature for that position. So you'll look on the outside for someone who's in that maturity level.
Correct. Yep.
So Coach Zoe, take us to the other side. So, we do have a certain segment of the podcast who are senior level athletes or maybe just graduated and are still applying for grad assistance jobs. What kind of recommendation or advice would you give to someone that is going to be, this is July, August, they're about to start grad assistance job, but they're going to be the coach at the school that they were just hanging out and partying with and all that kind of stuff. What kind of advice would you give to that coach?
The best advice I can give is separate yourself. Not, talk to the athletes and say, I'm here, you're here. Separate yourself mentally of who you plan on being. The best thing I did was I set limitations and ground rules for myself. I had some really close friends that were younger than me. They were sophomores on the team. I wasn't going to lose those relationships. Those were some of my closest friends. I mean, they're my closest friends today. I couldn't sever those relationships, but I had limits of who I would be with them. I had to make sure they understood that I was Coach Zoe. I had to make sure they understood that when we got to practice, and luckily I didn't coach them directly. I had to let them understand that when we're at practice, we're at a meet, this is how we operate. And it just established the guidelines for yourself of how you plan on holding yourself accountable, how you plan on presenting yourself, how you plan on navigating if someone comes to you in a way that doesn't put you in the coach's ranks. The same, like if they come to you and say, hey Zoe, hey Alonzo, what's up, man? You want to go out? Like, okay, they're breaching that. How do you have that conversation and saying, no, this is who I am, this is where I am? We have to be able to separate that. It's establish those guidelines. I got some really good advice from our compliance guys, which, you don't really go to compliance guys often for advice. But, they gave me really good advice about just, how to hold relationships and what you can and can't do. And I think they made me more comfortable being able to stay close to the people I was close to. And then I luckily was away from the program for a couple months as I was looking for jobs. I graduated early here at Pitt. So I graduated in April. I didn't start coaching until October. So the freshmen, the new kids hadn't seen me for a couple months. And when I got back to campus, I was in some ways a different person from who I was when I first graduated, because I had decided to go into coaching, I think probably in August, late August, early September. And it was another month. So I was mentally prepared going in. So who they saw coming in was Coach Zoe.
So I'm impressed, Coach Zoe. You've mentioned now at least two people that I can remember. I'm getting old, so the memory's not great, even 5 minutes ago, that weren't coaches. So you mentioned right there, you just mentioned, I got advice from my compliance director. And by the way, shout out to compliance directors. The job,
do a lot.
Oh my gosh. The job has changed radically. But they used to be only looked at as like the internal affairs officers for police. Like they were like, oh man, you're just trying to bust me. I know you at the same school as me, but you ain't on the same team as me. But they have an extremely tough job. But I love that you said, I got advice from my compliance director. And then earlier you mentioned your, I believe it was, you called them your life skills.
Yeah. He's associate athletic director and other titles now.
Well, I love that you went outside the circle of coaching and track and field. Like, if you'd have said, I called up Carl Lewis and asked him advice, and Amy Deem, et cetera, you'd be like, oh, okay. Yeah. Those are well thought out and smart people in our sport. But you didn't pigeonhole yourself in that. Like, you expanded your network in that sense. I have a lot of respect for that. So what I heard you say in regards to someone who's going to become a GA, specifically at the team that they were just on, is one, you've got to have the expectation of yourself that it is different. You can't have the best. I basically heard you can't have the best of both worlds. You can't still be the chummy athlete, student athlete, and also now Coach Zoe. So I heard that, and then have that expectation of yourself that you're going to elevate. You've now got that title, coach. You're going to have to do things differently. Did you do? We talked earlier about Coach Webb's attitude and beliefs in dressing. Did you do any of that? And I don't mean necessarily that you went bow tie and everything, but did you have any a thought process of, okay, when I'm at practice, I'm going to wear a polo now. I'm not going to wear a t-shirt or not. I'm just curious.
No, I didn't. But it was different in the sense of like being on time, or, when practice started, we're locked in, it's just more so the way I carry myself into practice. I didn't change much in that regard, because I thought that in my brain, the kids would think it was fake, like he's trying too hard. So I still wanted to meet a lot of them where they were at.
Yeah, that's important.
Kind of work through it.
So what I heard you just say there, Coach Zoe, was that when you were an athlete, if practice started at 2:00, you're like, all right, I'll get there at 2. But now you're a coach, you're like, oh, I better be there at 2:45. So were you late to practice? I'm gonna ask.
No, if I was late for practice, you were gone. Yeah, there's no late to practice.
All right, just making sure. All right.
Then or now.
I don't know too many athletes who become coaches who were the athletes that were late all the time. Like, they were usually the guys and girls that were there, on time is late, right? So they were there at 5 minutes till or 10 minutes till, and were spiked up already.
Early you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And on time is 15 minutes early. So
Coach Webb, I can see why you hired the guy. I mean, come on, that's the attitude to have right there. If you have that attitude with your whole life, get out here. Nothing can stop you for that right there. Well, as we wrap up today, gentlemen, tell me what's got you excited about University of Pittsburgh here? What's coming up? How are things going? And what's now that we're past COVID, we're going to have a normal year next year. That's what I'm praying and hoping for. What's got you excited about the Panthers?
Good, Coach Zoe.
I'm excited to carry on what we started this year. I think, obviously with coming off a pandemic, it was very different for us. Pitt's just a different place in general. We have to travel to compete. We have to get creative when we practice. So getting back to our normal practice routine, normal travel routine, getting the athletes to kind of expand upon the fight that they went through this past year and how many of them persevered to the highest levels. That's what I'm most excited for. We built some new initiatives. We did some things. We gave the athletes a little bit more control and a voice through everything. And I think we have to continue on that as well, of getting the athletes involved. And, this is their program just as much as it's Coach Webb's program, as much as it's, my program, that it's my alma mater. It's so much more than that. So I think just growing that. But we also have just some great athletes that are returning. We had some seniors that dedicated themselves to us over the past 4 years and, giving us a fifth. We had 2 All-Americans indoor.
Awesome.
And then a group of All-Americans outdoor. And we did it by committee. We did it next man up, who's going to work the hardest. And it worked out for us. And now I think next year going into that with that mindset of if we just lock in and we work as hard as we did, it's going to be almost easier to have that success and see that success because they started it this year.
Coach Webb?
Yeah, no, I'm always excited about every year that's coming, but even more so because every time, it's an Olympic year, you get more, people get fired up, they see all these great athletes. And also some of the athletes on your team get an opportunity to watch some of the people they lined up against like a month before. You see some ACC athletes making finals at the Olympic trials and things like that. And they're saying, hey, man, I wasn't that far away from this person. And that gets them fired up, for to come back and do something special. So this year, I think it's going to be really special because of it's an Olympic year, even though it's an Olympic year, 2021, but it's an Olympic year. What I thought was kind of unique was, we didn't know what to expect during the pandemic, and we were thinking, man, people weren't allowed to train. We're going to all be behind or whatever. This has probably been one of the best track and field years and maybe in ever. Like it was like people are running these crazy times and putting up these crazy performances in a pandemic year. And you're like, what in the world? So, I think the athletes were just chomping at the bit, man. They just get out there, get after it. And I think our team is going to be no different this year, being in an Olympic year, and they're going to watch starting July 30th or whatever, when the track and field starts. I think it's going to be, they're going to be watching it and they're going to say, hey, man, I was competing against these guys or these girls. And this year, man, I'm going to really, if they can do that, I'm going to be able to do it. So I'm really excited for this year coming up.
The trick as a coach is to maintain their excitement in July, August, September, all the way. All the way. April, yeah. March, May. Sure. You mentioned the performances, and my favorite meet, even maybe honestly above the Olympics, because I've never been to the Olympics personally, is the indoor Division I championships. I mean, it's unbelievable. And this year, again, every year I go, it's like, oh, this is the best it's ever going to be. Like they can't top this next year. And then next year, the athletes and coaches go out and top it. Coach, so when you mentioned you had a couple of All-American indoors and then outdoors, I was like, well, I'm more impressed with the indoors. I mean, I'm not, saying anything bad about the outdoors because that's tough too, but the indoors, toughest meet to make finals. It's amazing. Well, I'm glad there's a lot of excitement in the program. It's a very historical program. It's a very special place in the city of Pittsburgh. Very blue collar, work hard, get her done type of attitude. Yeah. I always have a place in my heart for alumni that are coaching at their alma mater. It just, when you call a recruit and you tell them how great Pittsburgh is, and it's like, well, how I know how great it is? I went to school here. Like that. There's a lot of legitimacy in that. So I have a big love for that. So a lot of special things going on at Pittsburgh, and I'm just so happy. We've been talking for maybe months to get you guys on the podcast, and this was all I ever dreamed. This was so good. I think we brought a lot of value to the listeners, and I'm just so proud that you'd allow us to uplift and honor both of you guys' unique journey in this amazing profession.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Thank you. And I honestly, I appreciate you giving, just that light to Coach Webb, and how he was able to let this happen. And it's not easy. I can tell you that it's not easy. We went through some moments throughout it, but Coach Webb is that prime example of like just being a good person, being a good head coach, and treating everyone with respect and giving opportunities, how people can grow and thrive. And that's whether you're related or not. So I appreciate the platform for that.
Well, you keep making him look good, and one day I'm going to have you back on the show, and it's going to be Coach Zoe, the head coach somewhere. I just if that's what you even want. I mean, yeah. I was like, you mentioned a lot of assistant coaches want to be head coaches. Not everybody there. A lot of people.
Right.
I don't want to say the smart ones, but the smart ones who understand that I'm not a head coach. I want to coach. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I love coaching.
Man, I'm just so thankful for both of you guys today. You know, the most valuable thing that you can give me is your time, and so we spent almost 2 hours a day. And I know you're extremely busy. Just because it's July does not mean you're out sipping Mai Tais and not working. So, but I'm just so appreciative of you guys. And I'm so appreciative of you for being here again this week to listen to these awesome coaches. I think, my goal is always here to bring immense value. I love that the conversation had so many twists and turns. We learned about a club coach that, went on to the college, market, not the college market, but, went on to become a college coach and then becomes a head coach. The ups and downs of having a kid who becomes a track athlete and becomes a track coach. And then really, I love that conversation, gentlemen, about, hiring athletes and athletes transitioning to coaches, because we see that a lot. And so we want to make sure, our coaches are doing it better every time they can. So thank you for being here listening today. If you received value from today's podcast, I'll go out on a limb and think that someone else in your network would receive value. Give us a share, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, whatever these cool kids are doing. Coach Zoe knows all about that social media. Coach Webb and I can't.
Not so much.
Yeah, I can't even spell Twitter. So I don't know. That's not true. If you're on Twitter with me at Mike Cunningham, I love Twitter. So thanks for being here today. Join us next week and we'll have another amazing coach or two and share their journey in this amazing profession. Have an awesome week, guys.